As the cool, crisp fall air descends on Belmont Park, there are few places you'd rather be than in the paddock at Belmont or really anywhere at Belmont. And for me, it's with my friend Richard Migliore here in the set of the National Racing Report. Good day. Thanks for joining us. No Jason Blewett, but we're here, and we got a lot of races to talk about and a lot of Breeders' Cup implications.
Yeah, I mean, it's the time of year. We're heading towards the Breeders' Cup. Most of these horses, it's their final prep, and we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we saw some pretty good performances both here and out in California. We saw a couple races at Churchill Downs as well, but we'll start out right here with the older filly and mare. There's a 3-year-old in this race as well, Carolina, but Wedding Toast, the heavy favorite as we go to the start of the Beldame.
And she got away very cleanly, Andy. She was very on the engine, but very controlled. I mean, 24-47 going one turn, mile and an eighth to go 24. It was reminiscent, and I'm not comparing them to Seattle Sioux. When Seattle Sioux did that in the Marlboro Cup against the Firm, 24 going a mile and an eighth.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That was that was the days when they actually usually went faster early in those races. You know, the key, I think the key moment in this race, there's two and they're connected, Richie. It's what you said. The fact that she broke as fastly as she did. She just got right out the lead very easily. But also in the connections of Hot Stones decided not to take it to her. I think they thought, you know what? Let's hope that she's not at her best off the layoff, and then if we can sit outside of her in a controlled pace, we can win the race if we're good enough. We're not going to win this race if we take it to her.
Interesting, though, talked to Roddy Valenti before the race, and he said, we're going. I want her on the lead. I either want to try to win it. I don't care about being second. I'll be sixth before, and it just didn't work that way. So I don't know. Somebody called an audible, maybe.
Doesn't it make sense to you watching the race, though? That's what was going on here?
Well, watching it, absolutely. If I didn't know what I knew before the race, talking with him, and maybe it was because Wedding Toast broke so well that it kind of discouraged Castellano from going on with Hot Stones.
What about Rod Ortiz's move here with Catch My Drift, who ran third? He sensed they were going slowly and made an aggressive 3 to 4 wide move at around the 5/16 and 3/8 pole. That's kind of uncharacteristic for him. I liked it, Richie. I thought he tried to seize the moment. He was never finishing better than third anyway.
Well, I think he was also looking up and seeing Coralina in behind the eventual winner, Wedding Toast, and saying, well, if Wedding Toast doesn't go on, I can move and keep Coralina trapped there. Then, of course, Wedding Toast went on, and so did Coralina. I thought tactically it's the right thing. No, if you're going to do something, think about it and do it.
Do it
Be
decisively.
Aggressive and go. I mean, we're going to see it later in the Turf Classic. I thought the move that Joe Bravo makes was decisive and go for it.
I totally agree. And, I watched it with Chad Brown, and we both felt her the same way. She was going to be third anyway, as it turned out, and he made a decisive move. I like the move. It's interesting what you say about Hot Stones. It just adds fuel to the fire that sometimes the connections have one idea and the riders do another thing. As it turned out, though, to be honest with you, Hot Stones didn't run at all, so I don't think it really mattered. And Wedding Toast was the best horse in this race. Yeah, the race was a bit of a gift to her. It was a slow pace, but she came back. What I like is she came back as good as she left, and that's an important factor because she is the second best older filly and mare in the country.
Well, absolutely, and if Beholder does stay on course for the Classic, this makes Wedding Toast the favorite in my estimation for the distaff. And Kieran talked about it. She missed most of the summer because of a foot issue. He says it wasn't a big deal, something we had to attend to, but then she's been training brilliantly up there. And listen, after going 47-2 to go a mile and an eighth in 47-3, she ran.
Oh, she's a very, very good horse. And one quick question before we go on. Is it me, or does it just seem like Godolphin has a stronger U.S. hand now than they've ever had in the past overall?
Oh, I would agree with that, and they've spread it out. I mean, obviously they have Kieran, and they have Tommy Albatrani and Owen Hardy. They've moved their horse around. It's not just under the Saeed bin Suror banner, and I think they've gotten very, very good at scouting what horses need to be here. I think that's why we've seen Bernardini kind of having more success as a stallion. They're leaving horses here that are going to excel in North American racing.
And hopefully they'll continue to leave them here because that's how they're going to flourish, and it does seem like they're doing well. Listen, they spend a lot of money, but we've talked about them not having success. They now are. But let's move out to California, and perhaps the best horse, I'd have to say the best horse that ran this weekend was Beholder, and I feel sorry for her competition. There wasn't any, but I feel sorry for the ones that tried to be, Richie.
I mean, this is as easy as a horse can win any race, let alone a Grade 1. And I guess this is exactly what Richard Mandela and Gary Stevens were looking for. Let's win. It's important to win, obviously, a Grade 1. But let's do it without using her. Basically a paid public workout.
And it's something you talk about so much that I sometimes get sick of hearing it, but you're right about it, is that horses don't mature until they get older. Now, she had a lot of issues. Richard Mandela's finally got her sound, and she's she's developed. She was always a very, very good horse. She's developed into a special horse, Richie.
Oh, she is. She's spectacular. And I think as much physically they matured, this mare mentally had to grow up. I mean, we saw what she did the day she was second to Princess of Silmar in the Kentucky Oaks. She kind of flipped in the post parade. She used to throw little tantrums. Well, it seems like they've gotten her all past that. Mentally, she's mature. Obviously, physically, she's more mature. She is just spectacular.
She's a machine. She really is tremendous. And it's funny, you talk about it, and they're talking about now running in the Breeders' Cup Classic and facing off against American Pharoah. And I think we need to talk about a few things there. Myself, I'd take the easy money in the distaff, but it's beginning to look like she'll be a shorter and shorter price. American Pharoah is going to be favored over her, but how much of a favorite over American Pharoah is she really going to be? Or is he really going to be over her, I should say?
It's an interesting question. I don't know. And I mean, if you look at her in the form she's in, you've got to give her a legitimate chance to beat him. I mean, she's tactical. She doesn't need a certain trip, but she's going to put herself in the right place. I mean, what would you? I mean, you're better at this than me. What would you think?
I don't know. You know, to be honest with you, I've been struggling with it because you look at it and you talk about tactical. American Pharoah is going to be somewhat in the heat of the battle. He's not necessarily going to be right in the middle of it, but he's going to be relatively close. We saw in the P Classic that A, she can get a mile and a quarter quite easily and quite impressively, and B, she can do it sitting 5, 6, 7 lengths off the lead. Now, maybe it was an easier situation where they were less talented horses and she didn't have to battle anybody to get where she was. But I got to tell you, right now, it seems very, very close, and just the thought of that is remarkable.
It comes up as an exciting prospect. The thing about Beholder, too, is she's going to be the hunter. He's going to be the hunted. And she has the ability to make quick, shifty moves, much like Sunday Silence and Easy Goer. I think she can make multiple moves, take it to him tactically, and, you know, nobody's better than that than Gary Stevens.
No, he's been tremendous on her, and I'm starting to believe him. I know he's ridden a lot of horses that were the best horses ever, but I'm starting to think this might be one of them. Let me ask you a question. If she wins the Classic, is it possible she could be Horse of the Year over American Pharoah?
I think it's possible. I think it's not probable, but it is possible, and she's going to garner a lot of respect. A filly beating the boys, but a Triple Crown winner, that's pretty strong.
And now I'm going to ask the question that's going to get us in trouble. Is she the best of the fillies or mares that we've seen over the last 10 years?
I don't like to compare generations.
Rich and I can only get in trouble with that one as we head to the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic here at Belmont Park. A mile and a half around, Shining Copper was the rabbit in this race. He did his job. Manny Franco made sure he went fast. Richie, I want to talk about a couple trips here. You mentioned Joe Bravo earlier, but also talk about Joel Rosario and Twilight Eclipse.
Didn't anticipate. Did not look for an escape valve until it was too late. Listen, Big Blue Kitten was very good.
He's on the inside, Joel.
Yeah, and he's going to wind up right in behind the rabbit, who went fast. And going a mile and a half, I think if I get down to somewhere down the backstretch, the 5/8 point, I look up and I see Shining Copper in front of me. I'm already thinking about how I'm going to get out from behind him. And he just never had a chance to until it was too late. And listen, Twilight Eclipse may have been best on this day.
It really might have been.
Yeah, because the way he re-rallied. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Big Blue Kitten because he did make that aggressive, bold move, and maybe he got to wandering a little bit, and they did break the track record. But the way this race panned out, you have to think Twilight Eclipse was going to be in a very tough battle for the win.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. If I own Twilight Eclipse or I bet him, and neither of them are the case, I would be very, very frustrated, legitimately so, because you say the other horses kind of got away from him. It's not that he got blocked and he sort of didn't have room while he was idling with the other horses. They got a length or two in front of him. Forget about the winner.
Yeah.
Even the second horse, Slumber, did, and that's impossible to make up. They were going quickly, Richie.
And my thought process always on Twilight Eclipse has been that he's a bit more of a grinder where he doesn't have a quick turn of foot. Well, he showed more of a turn of foot yesterday when he finally escaped the trick bag he was in. And maybe they run against each other 10 times, Big Blue Kitten and Twilight Eclipse, and Big Blue Kitten maybe beats him 8 out of 10 times, but maybe this was 1 out of the 10 that he should have got.
I think that's very fair. Maybe I would say maybe a little less, maybe even 7 or 6. Big Blue Kitten, though, is the more accomplished horse, and that's the bottom line. And that's why you say it's maybe 8 out of 10, because they've had his chances and Big Blue Kitten has beaten him. But Twilight Eclipse is a hard trier. Slumber's been terrific this year. Chad's done an unbelievable job with him. But the big old horse, Big Blue Kitten, just keeps rolling along with Joe Bravo.
Well, and like what you just said, Joe Bravo, I think they're synonymous. They go like peas and carrots. They are just, he has so much confidence in this horse, and it just seems like the horse responds so well to him. They are a match made in heaven.
I've had this conversation with Chad on a number of occasions, and Chad basically says exactly as you do. Nobody rides this horse as well as Joe does, and they've had such great success together. I think it's a tribute to everybody that works for Chad, as well as Joe Bravo, and just the job they've done with this horse for the Ramseys. And Blue Blue Kitten, a horse who was running in claiming races, has become a major factor in big races.
A major factor. And just, you say you get sick of hearing it, a 7-year-old wins it, a 7-year-old second, a 6-year-old third, a 5-year-old third. We want to see these horses stick around. They get better with age.
And that's the good thing, though, about this turf division, especially, is that there's no real market to breed these horses.
Yeah.
So they get to stick around and race. And you're right, though. They get to get good and stay good. And this is a fun division, a good group of horses. And they're all going to have to deal with Flintshire at Keeneland. We'll see how that works out as we head to our last race before we take a break. And we're going to look at the Vosburg, the Grade 1 Vosburg here at Belmont, all 3 Grade 1s. And Rockfall was a heavy favorite. I'm going to tell you, he looked like he was in trouble at a number of occasions.
He really did, but him being looking like he was beaten at several points makes me like him more because he has shown his determination, his grit. He's not just a horse that needs everything to go his own way, and he's just brilliant. He's tough as well as brilliant.
I could not agree more with you, Richie. I think his toughness, his tenacity. You know, my immediate thought after the race was I would have loved to have seen him against Private Zone, and I hear they're pointing Private Zone to the Breeders' Cup Mile, and I just am dying to see 2 horses, neither of who want to lose, hook up, and both talented horses, and I think that's a shame. I wish he was running in the sprint, but he got a 2-pronged challenge, Rockfall. It looked like Stallwalker Dude might get him here, and then it's Saludos Amigos, the other Jacobson horse, waiting in the wings that almost gets him late.
Well, exactly. They threw several punches at him, and he kept fighting them off. And you could see, here, Castellano waited a long time before he went to the whip. He knew he was kind of saving just enough. I don't know if he knew that it was going to be Saludos Amigos coming, but in case someone else was coming. But basically, he was surrounded by challengers. And then talking to Todd Fletcher after the race, he said, I didn't really tighten him up so much for this race because I was already thinking ahead to the Breeders' Cup. I was hoping I did enough with him, but I didn't want him to be empty off of this race. I wanted him to go forward off of it.
He's done a great job with him. He's done such a great job with Red Rifle. Obviously did not run well at all in the Joe Hirsch, but it doesn't take away from the job Todd has done. And, obviously Todd gets a lot of horses, but this year he doesn't have the 2-year-olds, and I think the jobs he's done with Rockfall as well as Red Rifle and Liam's Map as well have shown why he's a top trainer. It's not just about getting a boatload of good 2-year-olds.
So Todd went over $300 million in earnings yesterday, in more than any trainer in the history of the game. And years ago, it used to be the jockey would have more earnings than the trainer at the end of the year. Well, Todd kind of changed up that. He's brilliant. He's great at what he does with all kinds of horses. And a little bit of love for Saludos Amigos, who ran giant and did get squeezed a bit at the start. I still don't think he was going to get by Rockfall if Rockfall saw him.
I'm still not sure he didn't run the best race in a funny way, though.
Yeah,
I hear what you're saying.
Right. Yep.
And a little love for Palace, too.
Yep.
It's only his 3rd start of the year. He hadn't run since early Saratoga, and he ran a game and gritty, as Jason would like to say, 4th in this race. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back with the Gallant Bloom and La Verdad here at Belmont Park. Welcome back to Belmont Park. Andy Serling, Richard Migliori. The National Racing Report continues. We've got a lot more races to show and a lot more Breeders' Cup implications to talk about. And we're going to start out, Richie, with a race, the Gallant Bloom, that features La Verdad, maybe one of the coolest horses in training. We're going to see her terrific performance, and then we're going to talk about whether or not you think she can get the 7 furlongs of the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint.
The thing about her, she always breaks running. Her gait speed, now obviously she's fast. There's a lot of fast horses that don't have what I consider gait speed. Her first step is as good as her 10th step. She leaves in stride. And the difference with her this year, though, Andy, too, is that when she hits the front, she actually rates herself along, where last year she kind of ran through the bridle. And maybe that's going to help her get the 7/8. I have questions about it.
Yeah, I do, too, especially because Wavell Avenue almost beat her here. And you're facing horses like Cavorting, Terrace in that race, to name a couple of terrific horses, and I think they present problems. And the question for you is, because somebody brought this up to me yesterday on Twitter, actually, do you think they'll also consider the regular sprint at 6 furlongs and decide maybe that's a better spot for her?
That's an interesting question. I mean, you think about it. I mean, if Private Zone's going to the mile, which I've talked to Renee Douglas, and it sounds like that's what they want to do with the short wire, they think they're going to have an advantage. Post's going to play a part in that, though. Rockfall's the horse to beat, right?
How much faster is he than her?
It's an interesting question. And now you're not going 7/8, you're going 6. So.
I agree. I feel as though she might have a better chance to beat them at 6 furlongs than to beat the girls at 7. Yes, the boys will be tougher. And listen, we'll know when the pre-entries come out, and I'm sure they're going to. I have to believe they'll go for both. So she has a chance for both. And to see just how much speed is there in the race. Because at the end of the day, she's going to be top female sprinter if she wins the filly and mare distaff.
Right.
But if she wins the Breeders' Cup Sprint, I'm not sure she won't be both, sprinter and filly sprinter.
It's a really good point. I didn't even think about it in that context. But, I mean, I agree. Going 6 furlongs, you can just let her run the entire race. 7 furlongs, you're going to have to try to save. And with horses like Therese, is that how you say it?
Terrace. I think Terrace.
Terrace.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to get an easy time of it, and you're going to have to run hard for 7 furlongs. It's a really interesting question. I hadn't even thought about it.
But she's a terrific horse, whatever they do with her, and she's compiled an amazing record. I think 15 wins and 21 starts, and only 2 seconds. And that says to me, when she has her game with her, she's almost impossible to beat. And one of them was a brutal beat right at the wire in this race last year. When she is ready to play, she wins.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, think about in this day and age, horse winning 15 races. We don't see horses run 15 times a lot of
It's absolutely amazing. We'll head to the Pilgrim for the 2-year-old Colts on the inner turf course here at 1 1/16. And Richie, this was a blanket finish. It was a fun race. I want you to talk about some trouble some horses had and how good are these horses overall.
I think they're very good. I like them a lot. I think we've got some nice colts.
They're lightly raced, so they have so much room to improve.
And they went, I thought, a pretty legitimate pace for, on the inner turf. 24-1, 48-1. Isotherm, an absolutely outstanding individual, physically as beautiful a horse like his sire, Lonhro. Incredibly impressive. I think Raise the Bar is the horse you want out of this. I thought he, didn't show enough speed early, and he had to make up so much ground that his pop kind of flattened out a little bit late, where if he was a little more involved and he didn't have to work so hard to get back in the race, he probably would have been able to finish the deal.
And even though he saved ground, I always feel like trying to rally between horses towards the inside, it's just tougher than being outside in the clear like Isotherm was. I think there's 2 discussions, the ground loss and the sort of comfortable position. But I agree. I know it was a blanket finish, and sometimes the temptation to say it just wasn't that good a race. These are all lightly raced horses, and I think they're showing enough that there might be some real talent in there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm excited about this division. We had a maiden race on Friday. I thought was a real good turf race.
Giamatti.
Yeah,
Strike Midnight.
Strike Midnight. I mean, that horse, he looked like he belongs with this group as well. Whether he goes, I doubt he can get in the Breeders' Cup because he only broke his maiden. But there's the Awad here the same weekend, and he might be a horse that's going to be a part of this division. I like this 2-year-old turf division.
I always think they're a fun division anyway because you get a lot of players. You think of some of the races there, like the Hall of Fame, a big field, close finishes. They make racing exciting, and I think certainly we'll hear from Isotherm as well as some others in the Breeders' Cup. Let's head out to California. Let's look at the 2-year-olds there. Once again, it's a case, Richie, where the boys are not that impressive, but the girls, wow, were they impressive.
Yeah, the girls were very impressive. We're going to watch Nyquist kind of do his drunken sailor impersonation through the stretch. I think he's a little bit exposed out of this race as maybe not wanting to really go this far. The runner-up Swipe ran well inside, had to be intimidated in there because Nyquist did drift in and out, and you just never know quite how far they're going to go.
He also came out a little bit to make more room for himself. I watched the head-on. I heard some people say there should have been a DQ. No. I think that's preposterous, and there was barely any contact.
I don't believe there should have been a DQ, but I do think that horse got uncomfortable at a few different spots. But they never went over the line. Let's put it that way. And I'll give Nyquist credit. I mean, he was game, but they went 23-47, 3/4 and 12. He should have finished it up a little better than this.
I agree, and it's interesting. The same connections shipped Rowlis to Saratoga the Hopeful to keep him apart from Nyquist, and Nyquist was the better one. Now, Rowlis is going to run in the Champagne. Based solely on the Hopeful, I think Rowlis is the better horse. We'll see what he does in the Champagne. We might see a different horse in that race.
Well, maybe Rowlis wants more ground, and maybe Nyquist doesn't. So that's a great equalizer. I also think we've seen some colts break their maiden around here that might be better than what we've seen in stakes so far.
I completely agree with you, Richie. We're talking about that race that we showed at the end of the show last week. Not impressed by Nyquist, who went 6/5 of a second slower than the filly did out there, and that's Songbird, who ran the Chandelier Stakes, and she only went, I believe, 4/5 slower than a very easy winner in Beholder. But I got to tell you, Richie, we were impressed by her race at Del Mar. this race was otherworldly. She buries the field.
She was very good. And you know, my question out of the race the last time was, does she want to go on? And I think she answered that with an emphatic yes. I mean, she was cruising along faster than the boys early, 23 flat, 46 and 4, fast pace, and continued. Mike shook her up a bit in mid-stretch just because he said it seemed like she was losing interest, like she'd been alone for so long, and she kind of jumped back in it. I think this filly really pointed out that she is the best in this division to this point.
I'll tell you, when I got home last night and started reviewing these races, and obviously we know what Beholder is, and she's as good a horse really as there is in the country, if not the maybe arguably the best horse in the country, but this was the race that I was just in awe of this performance. And like you say, he shook the reins up because the other horse made a little run at her, and there was almost 10 lengths back to the third finisher. She just runs away from her again, and the fact that she was going fast early and she got the lead so fastly in here, she just breaks from the gate and she goes off. I hope they don't take her speed away from her. I hope we see her in the Breeders' Cup. I'm not. There's some question about whether or not she was originally nominated, but even if they have to pay $100,000, they got to go. And Tap to It is going to skip the Frizette and the Alcibiades, apparently, to point for the Breeders' Cup. I wouldn't skip any race to point with a meeting with this horse.
No, I think you want to get what you can get right now, especially when it comes to grade ones. I think, though, Mike did a smart thing, though. You don't want to let young horses think the race is over at the 8th pole or the 16th pole. Even if you're winning easily, not that you have to beat them up. Let them run through the wire. They got to know they got to finish the deal.
Now, it's one of the reasons that Mike Smith rides a lot of good horses and rides them well, or just lessons like that. As we take a look at the final race before we take a break, this was the the theoretical California prep for the Breeders' Cup Classic. I don't want to knock these horses, and I don't know where this performance came from, as this was just the 4th start for Smooth Roller, but he exposed the others. He retired Bayern, as he's retired after the race. He buries the field, but it's hard to believe this has any major implications going forward, at least for now.
It doesn't feel like it, and Bayern, obviously, when you get to go that easy on it, you're just done. I mean, if he couldn't win with the setup yesterday, they did the right thing by retiring him. You know what? He's got a classic to his credit.
I love Bayern. I feel bad he just wasn't a good horse this year.
Well, it shows, though. Horses aren't, they're not machines. Right. They're flesh and blood, and they change. And obviously, he just never regained the form that he had at one period last year. Smooth Roller was good, but I'm with you. I don't really know what to make of this as far as it goes, going forward to the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Listen, the time was reasonably fast if you compare the 1 1/8 to the 1 1/16, where in a way it feels like he went a little faster than Beholder, and once again she won very easily. Who knows? His 4th start, maybe he's a completely different horse. And the one thing that, quickly before we go to break with Bayern, I think that people do need to remember, we sometimes, and I do it also, are critical of people for retiring their horses, we say, early after the 3-year-old year. Well, with Bayern, it didn't really work out racing him again, and there are inherent risks to racing him sometimes, and keep that in mind when we start spending other people's money.
Well, and they gave him every opportunity to succeed. It just didn't work out. But you know what? He's going home, and I'm sure he'll have a good second career.
Yeah, and I don't want it to take away from the good things he did last year. We've still got 3 races to go. We're going to head to Churchill Downs when we come back on the National Racing Report. Welcome back to the National Racing Report. Richard Migliori and Andy Serling here at Belmont Park in our 3rd floor studio. We've got a couple of dirt races, theoretically, one a prep for the Breeders' Cup Classic. That's the Lucas Classic. And then we'll have the ACAC, a theoretical prep for the Breeders' Cup dirt race. In some ways, they're identical situations. Geothermal, an ex-claimer that last ran 2nd in July at Indiana Downs, runs down departing. It was 6-5. It was a nice stretch run, Richie. I just can't imagine this has any real Breeders' Cup implications.
I think this was their Breeders' Cup. I just, it was their day. They got to shine, enjoy the moment, and let's basically move on. I mean, he ran game, and you got to give him credit anytime a horse wins. And departing seems like a horse that could surprise. He jumps up, and he runs good races, but he's a cup below what we're talking when we're talking Breeders' Cup Classic.
On the other hand, Al Stahl, I believe, is one of almost $2 million with departing, and I think that's one of the reasons that we know that Al Stahl is a good horse.
Well, don't you think he's tremendous at campaigning horses and making the most of their abilities?
Absolutely, and it speaks volumes for what he did with this horse as we turn our attention to the ACAC handicap, also run at Churchill Downs on Saturday, and Viva Majorca, who had seen run, I believe, 3rd in our Forgo last Saturday, was the heavy favorite, but Tapiture, who was 2nd in the Breeders' Cup Mile last year when he got that fast pace to close into, he grittily held him off in a race that has probably little implications for the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, and you know, I know Tapish has run well 2 turns. I think he's a better 1-turn horse because he kind of gets in the race the right way and he doesn't have to maneuver as much into the turn. And he seems like a horse that just kind of keeps coming at you as opposed to a horse that's shifty, which helps go in 2 turns.
Yeah, those are very good points. They both got buyer figures in the low 90s. Whether or not we see the Breeders' Cup, that remains to be seen. We do have one race left, and this was the Rodeo Drive at Santa Anita, and Graham Motion gets the money here with Photo Call. This was just a terrific ride by Drayden Van Dyke.
It really was. Every part of it, getting his position going forward, sit in the pocket. Now, he had 2 handfuls of horse, and, man, you're in that pocket going, something please open up because I don't want to eat this horse and be the GOAT. And sure enough, when there was a seam. And we've seen this now a couple of times. Graham Motion and Drayden Van Dyke have had very good luck together. They got lucky with a West Point horse out there earlier in the year, I believe in the Kilroe Mile, and a couple other horses she shipped there. But Drayden Van Dyke is a young guy who's got a big future. He's naturally light, so he doesn't have to fight his weight. And if he stays healthy, he's going to do a lot of good throughout his career.
It's one of the reasons I believe that Alex Cintron will fool the people, and somewhat myself included, that saw him not do well in Saratoga. If Graham Motion thinks he's a good rider and thought enough of him to have him ride his good horse in Saratoga, that's enough for me. And I'll tell you, I think Graham does a great job. In Photo Call, we saw her here. She took a tough beat very early at the Belmont meet in our Bogey. Winning a 1 1/4, win a Grade 1, headed the Breeders' Cup. Terrific trainer, and he not afraid to ship his horses around the country, including California. And as you point out, it's worked out well for him.
Well, and that's one of the beauties of training at Fair Hill, too. You're not beholden to any one racing jurisdiction. You get to move around.
Yeah, and he does it well. Super Saturday is coming up. We had a great day here on Saturday at Belmont. We got another one coming up Saturday, October 3rd. Food trucks, family fun activities. There will be a special North Shore Terrace ticket for Super Saturday, the Jockey Club Gold Cup, the Champagne, the Frisette, big races, and come out and support Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Once again, contact 844-NYRA-TICKS for that information. We hope you come out and visit us. No better place than Belmont Park. We've got 5 more weeks at this meeting. There's going to be a lot of good racing. The racing has been sensational so far. We hope you come out and visit us. There's no better place.
And the weather, too, is cooperating much like it did in Saratoga.
I agree. We've been very lucky so far, much unlike last year. That wraps it up today for the National Race Report. I want to thank Richard Migliori. Thank everybody in the truck, Mitch Levitas, and everybody else as well. And thank you for watching us in the National Racing Report, and we'll see you again next week.